Hey, well, welcome back to Omens. I'm your host Ryan, AM Air Pronouns, and this is episode 42, the Ace of Swords. So we're finally left the wands behind after more than a year and 2 months, give or take. And we are entering into a new suit, the Suit of the Swords. So, I think that was all. That was a very stunted introduction. If you're not used to it by now, what are you doing here? Alright. Making me a bit nostalgic for the Ace of Wands. I was going through my Tarot of the Angels deck, and I realized I never did the first few Wands Angels. I was like, dang, I didn't have those when I first started this, but now we do. I don't think I did Kabbalah the very first. Yeah, maybe I did. I can't remember now. I'm actually thinking that when I finish this, when I finish the first round of all the majors, I might go revisit some of those early Wands episodes and redo them. And then possibly cycle through the majors again. We'll see. That's most likely what we're going to do, but anyway, welcome to Halloween month, spooky season. Yeah, I'm not much of a big holiday person in general, so I don't much care. Halloween's fun though, it's got a nice aesthetic. And as you might have noticed, this is another 5-week month, or a 5-Sunday month, excuse me. So, yes, I will have a 5th week special, unlike August, where I totally forgot there were 5 weeks. Or didn't realize, not forgot. And so I will have a 5th week special. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be a lot. I went and set a high goal for myself. It's not going to be your usual... because everybody around Halloween does the history of Halloween, or Samhain, or... Samhain, depending on how you want to say it. I say Samhain, and witchcraft and all that in general. So I was like, yeah, no, let's do something different. So you will have to wait and see what that is. But yeah, that's gonna be a whole cadre of research for me. Alright, so anyway, it is the Ace of Swords. So we're back to the beginning, and we've currently, especially with the majors in hand, seen a lot of ones that in recent weeks or months or so don't have to go over it too much, but of course the number of the aces is 1. So 1, the first physical number, the only absolute number, again, kind of all the same stuff. We do have here, for the card I picked, is the Ace of Blades from the Supernatural deck. So here we've got an arm, definitely Dean's armor, one of the main characters in the show. So Dean, due to a long, complicated amount of random things, needing to kill someone and only having one way to kill the specific demon, of course, took upon himself the mark of Cain, and the knife of Cain, or the Cain's blade, or whatever it is, which is, as you can see here, the jawbone of a donkey. Now, only one half of the jawbone of a donkey. Now, when they always said in the Bible story the jawbone of a donkey, I always imagined the entire jawbone, like took an entire frickin' thing and just stabbed him straight with it, and it was like two-bladed type deal, but this is, in the show, they only did one blade, and it has a handle. It's not the back of the donkey's jawbone. Or the front. What do donkey's jawbones look like? Okay, can tell you. I haven't actually looked it up. Alright, but anyway, so this is, he took upon himself the mark of Cain, which is known to which Cain was given by which in the show, Cain was given by Lucifer, to bear it, which is why he killed, and Lucifer was given the mark of Cain by God. it comes out later near the end of the season when they finally destroy the Mark of Cain that, oh hey, that's actually the lock and key that was locking away the darkness, aka God's sister, but that actually turns out, well, spoiler alert, well, let's not do spoilers actually. I think we'll just leave it that spoiler as it's a lock and key. But anyway, so basically, but the important thing is the Mark of Cain tends to drive those who bear it demonically mad. Like, it's what caused Lucifer to rebel and become evil. It's what caused Cain to become, and to give into his murderous urges and jealousy. It's what causes Dean to, eventually turn, we'll say very evil just in case you haven't seen the show, but, well, at this rate, it's all over Tumblr, so. It's what causes Dean to turn into a demon after he's killed again. So it's, the Mark of Cain is a heavy burden to bear, and it's very interesting for the Ace of Blades, the Ace of Swords in this deck, is it's a heavy burden to bear. It seems rather simple and straightforward. It's a mark that allows you to use the blade and allows him to kill a specific type of demon that can't be killed by other means. But it also causes the bearer to go insane. And, I mean, fair enough. I mean, if we think about the creation story of, or the biblical myth of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the tree of knowledge comes with not only knowing good, but also knowing evil. Knowledge comes with realizing there is bad things in the world. There's bad as well as good, which the number 1 is the first number. It's where our infinity and numberlessness of 0 becomes something. It's where it comes into being. It's where knowledge happens. It's the divine presence entering. It's divinity entering into being, into existence. Well, no, not exactly. It was where divinity first becomes manifest, which, if you've been paying attention, yes, that has to do with Keter in the Kabbalah. I'm pulling that. So that's the interesting thing about the Kabbalah and the numerology, is they work so well together. I like using them to explain each other. So it's the first absolute number. It's the first everything has become manifest. It's, of course, applied to human existence. It's a key to verbal self-expression. It's where babies first learn to scream for attention. It's like they're hungry, or they're tired, or they need their diaper changed, or whatever. Verbal self-expression. They realize that they can't just kick. They're no longer in the womb where things naturally happen without them having to make things. They realize they're uncomfortable, and to get attention for that, they scream. Verbal self-expression. That's the first bit of it. And of course, the number 1 is an expression of the macro of the ego as a microcosm of the macrocosm, or the divine. So basically, self, singular self, as an expression of the multiple of all, the microcosm as macrocosm. Again, that Keter divinity coming into manifestation. And again, key to communication skills, which works with the blades. So it's a lot, but it's also, it originally looks like nothing. It's like, it's a 1, it's a single blade, but it comes with a lot. There's this ease has a price, creates a burden. If we didn't learn to scream as babies, we wouldn't have to eventually learn to talk, and then have to think, and then having to figure out how to word our words, or how to order our words type deal. So it starts out as, it seems like not much, but it eventually grows into something larger. We'll go with that. We'll just go with larger. It's not always necessarily bad. Sometimes we need to be able to talk to people, to talk sense into them, or talk sense out of them. And that's what. Alright, so second part of this Ace of Swords is the element. So, I'm pretty sure I probably mentioned this during the wands, but I associate wands with fire and swords with air. It's from what I can tell kind of an even split down the middle, like, or close to, I suppose. Half the people half card readers associate swords with air, and half card readers associate wands with air, and also vice versa with fire. So there's a reason for this, and I'm sure I've mentioned it before, because it sounds like something I would do, is people associate, excuse me, it's a very weird thing. It was, magicians like to hide their secrets, especially in the olden days, aka early mid-1800s type deal. Or even prior to that, back when the early days of alchemy, when they'd had to keep all their knowledge secret and mixed up to make sure that the uninitiated couldn't. It was basically a form of gatekeeping, except for it was also gatekeeping to save their lives in some cases. So it's like if nobody could understand it, then nobody could persecute them. Sorry. And that became eventually kind of a traditional way, like only those who are initiated and truly worthy of learning these things will be able to understand this knowledge. Like they'll have to come to their masters. Now that was to a degree a form of safety, especially when Christianity was still huge and witch trials were still going on, or at least magic was still illegal in some form or another. But eventually it became a bunch of crusty old white men who didn't want to let anybody else into their secrets because they were the good old boys club. So, but the results of that is some stuff is, specifically here, some people say, well, they said that swords are air and wands are fire as a misleading in order to make sure they kept some sort of secret. Talking about, I believe, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn for the most part, Arthur Edward Waite, and probably Pamela Smith as well. So they made it so they switched them so you wouldn't know, but then there's okay, maybe this is the real one, and they were supposed to switch it, but they didn't, so wands are actually fire and swords are actually air, and it's a back and forth, and nobody really knows which is true, because anybody who knew rightly sure as hell wasn't going to tell back then, and then by the time we get to the point where it's as open as it is now, all those guys are dead, and they never revealed they took their secrets to the grave, basically. So it's kind of an even split down the middle of, some people say swords are air, some people say they're fire, some people say wands are fire, others say they're air. It's, as far as I can tell, kind of a wobbly even split. Swords as air makes more sense, and wands as fire makes more sense, because wands are so when I think swords, I think sharp, cutting, biting, cold. So I think wind. Now, granted, air can be warm. There's warm breezes and all that. But it's still, if I think swords, I think sharp, and I think air. So air is slightly more sharp and cutting, and also words are sharper and can be cutting. But they also have that double-edged side where they can be blunt. So if you think like not like a double-edged sword, but like a one-sided sword where one side is sharp and the other is blunt, so it doesn't hurt as much. Something like that. And then wands are fire because they're sticks of wood. They light on fire. And also, fire in itself is not sharp and biting to me. It's more punchy. It's warm and spread, and when it burns all over at once. It doesn't slice you up, and that hurts as a whole. It's like all of this as a whole is now on fire, and it all hurts together. It's more like being beaten with a stick than stabbed with a knife. So that's kind of mine. The opposing I've heard for that is like, I'm not sure about the wands as air, but I hear more about the swords as fire because they're forged in fire. Okay, fair enough. If that's your role, that's your role. Cool. But for here, in my purposes, swords are air. And wands are fire. But, take it or leave it as you will. I'm just giving, if you're just seeing this one for the first time, don't know what to tell you, but if you've probably started near the beginning or something and you slowly got along, you're like, okay, by this point it's like, yeah, fairly obvious. I give a bunch of different associations, and that all correspond to the card, and you take what you need, leave what you don't, and hopefully it adds more to your understanding, which, again, is with swords, air, intelligence, understanding, knowledge, yada yada yada. Alright, moving on from that. So the air and the Ace of Swords, I have here my Hush Tarot deck, which is a very soaking wet person riding a unicorn in, and the unicorn is in full battle armor and being attacked by a bunch of birds. They look like songbirds, like sparrows, probably the bigger songbirds, and they've all got spears. They're attacking the unicorn, who's rearing up like in fear and trying to protect the person on its back, who is sopping wet, kind of a damsel in distress type deal. It's an interesting one. I'll give you that. Hush Tarot is always very interesting. Always kind of makes me think a bit more. Alright, so let's get into the associations of air with this card. So air, in general, has to do with movement, intelligence, intellect, the mind, the wind, flight. The colors of air associated with air are usually yellow and sometimes sky blue. And that sky blue, if any of you ever read Divergent, and the Divergent series, you know that the faction associated with science and logic and mental pursuits always wore a light blue, and that's because a light powder blue is good for helping increase your intellect and getting your mind moving, which is why you should never actually paint your bedroom in blue, even a dark blue, because it still tells your mind to be more active. Actually, a better color for your bedrooms would be a brown. Just FYI, little trivia there. So sky blue is, darker blue I tend to associate a bit more with water, or kind of a mix of water and air. So, but if we're thinking like a sky blue, like light powder blue, baby blue, or whatever, then I'd associate it a bit more with air, with the open sky, with freedom. Yellow, of course, because it's from the sun, joy, and in traditional, I want to say Hermetic / Wicca based and Hoodoo understandings of the colors, yellow is associated with intelligence and air. Comes from a multitude of things. Air is also the sounds that we make. So mountains, travel, freedom, instruction, study, spring. The air is often associated with the season of spring. So in this card with air, if this is the Ace of Swords, well, it is the Ace of Swords, not if it is. Again, with that kind of burden to bear that we saw in the Ace of Blades and the Supernatural deck, it's like this innocent person who's soaked to the bone was most likely running from something, running scared. It's something precious to be obtained. The unicorns, of course, often represent purity, innocence, and light, but they're also, if you go back to slightly older stories, they're deadly warriors. They are like, you don't fuck with unicorns because they will stab you through the heart. They ain't the rainbow farts that you see nowadays. Unicorns of yore were deadly, like drastically. Think a horse as a predator. Now, there's a terrifying image you don't want to, probably wish you never had in your head. That's what a unicorn was. A unicorn may have been an herbivore, but it was technically more akin to a predator. Like, there's even stories of unicorns being carnivores, like eating meat. I believe the Chinese unicorn, their version of it, actually did eat meat specifically. Like, it was a carnivore, not an herbivore. I believe. Someone might have to fact check me on that. But unicorns of yore were not pretty, sparkly, dance in the rain, and have wildflowers spring in their steps and shoot rainbows from their butt. Bullshit that we see nowadays. Unicorns were dangerous, deadly, and kind of awe-inspiring, honestly. And that's kind of why I've always liked unicorns to a degree. I mean, some of the pretty sparkly ones today they're nice, but yeah, I go for the more deadly stuff ones. Anyway, where was I going with that? Oh yeah. All right, so we've got a warrior here who's like rearing up, like, holy shit, these birds, and that's because it's being attacked by, I think you can see it here, these small birds. It's like the many, but if it was just one, it could get away, it could stomp it. But these many birds with spears in their beaks, they're going to cause problems. A lot of little troubles cause one big trouble for even the most battle-hardened warrior, especially since this unicorn has a damsel in distress to protect, an innocent to protect. And so the innocence of knowledge here, if we're going to go very, very symbolic, the innocence must be guarded from those that would like to destroy it. God, I don't know how to say that. I've got a sentence in my head, but it's not actually worded. I'm trying to get this symbolism out somehow. It's not working very well. Come on. I'm trying to figure out, like, at least something here is knowledge, learning, newness, understanding, but with that knowledge, with that new amazing things, there's always the flip side of the coin of this is deadly, and so this unicorn in between is like that warriorship, that discernment we hold to try to keep our minds from being destroyed by this, the gatekeeper bullshit, the just bullshit in general, like people going, no, that's wrong, we're gonna like take down this beautiful idea you have, this beautiful thought you have, and we're gonna just like utterly tear it down and destroy it. And it's a multitude, so you're having to try to protect that innocence, or have someone else protect that for you, someone being a guardian, like trying to protect you from this terror of the world type deal. That's kind of what I'm feeling, and that's a lot, but it's kind of what I'm getting. And as to how this associates with air, well, we've got the birds, of course, the flight. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just reading this card. We already did the air, so air and the Ace of Swords. The thing with this, as we'll find later on with the Astrology, is the Suit of Swords is associated with air, but the Ace of Swords is the element of air. Now, however, since we're getting close to that, in our celestial deck, as we've discovered, they don't go with the traditional astrology. So in the celestial deck, the Ace of Swords, it's the Ten of Swords, the tens are associated with the pure element as opposed to the aces like in traditional astrology. So in the celestial deck, the Ace of Swords is associated with Crucius or Crux, aka the Southern Cross, which the Southern Cross apparently used to be part of Centaurus or Chiron, the constellation of Centaurus, the constellation of Chiron. But it was so very low in the sky. It was considered part of Centaurus by the ancient Greeks, but it was so very low in the sky that after about 400 years so low in the sky that by about 400 Common Era, 400 CE, it had been pushed below the horizon due to the precession of equinoxes. So basically, as our world turns and spins and goes around the sun, which is also going around the center of the galaxy, or around whatever's in it goes around, which also goes around the center of the galaxy. I think it goes around the center. But anyway, as everything spins, basically, all of the farther constellations, the fixed stars, if you will, they're no longer staying in place because we're moving away from them. So slowly they start turning, which is why tropical astrology doesn't go based off the actual astronomical movement of the planets and stars. It goes after a fixed set from ancient Greek and Babylonian. It goes after a set position. It's like, this is a picture of the sky we're going with. We're going to set it like this, and we're going to say it like that. And it's just going to be like that. That's tropical astrology. Whereas sidereal astrology goes with a precession of equinoxes. Like, okay, so you weren't actually born in Capricorn. You were born actually in Pisces with the precession of the equinoxes, or something like that, or vice versa. So I'm not very up on sidereal astrology, but it's a fascinating thought. But anyway, so due to that precession of equinoxes, or basically the precession of the world moving through stuff, eventually Crucius dipped below the horizon to the point it was forgotten. So it was no longer part of Centaurus. It was rediscovered and named in... Oh, there it goes. And named in 1679 by Augustin Rayer. So basically he found it again, I believe, in Australia. And so it became known as the Southern Cross because while the South Pole doesn't have a fixed star to show where the pole is, the astronomical pole is, in the southern equator, southern hemisphere, thank you, southern hemisphere, unlike in the northern hemisphere where we do have a North Star. The southern hemisphere doesn't have a South Star, but the Southern Cross points directly to the southern astronomical pole. So it can be used as a direction. And, where is it? So, speaking of Australia, to the Australian Aboriginals, the Southern Cross was the head of their constellation Emu, and so the Southern Cross, I believe it's just the Southern Cross, is featured on the Australian national flag. I believe it's just the Southern Cross. I'd look it up, but I have something saved up on there. So, to the Inca, it was Chacana was the name of their sacred stepped cross, and should look that up too. But so, usually they have the stars in here correctly, but this one doesn't. Oh yeah, it's all too mixed in the picture, so maybe you can see it. So we've got these ones, obviously, and they're coming up through here. There's a couple on here. So you get that, and then it kind of curves there. I don't know, it doesn't curve like that. That's the... Trying to see this backwards. Okay, it kind of curves a little bit. Usually these have the constellations, I think. Might not, though. Maybe not. But yeah, so the Southern Cross, Chacana, so it kind of represented their stepped cross, which is a sacred cross and for the Inca. Where is it? There it is. Okay, so according to the Celestial Book, the sword emerging from the cross, so here in this picture itself, so we've got a cross up top, an equilateral cross, or whatever it's called, equidistance maybe, and below it is a sword pointing downwards. It's kind of coming from it. So they say that The the sword emerging from the cross depicts consciousness emerging from the earth. So the cross is a magical symbol of earth. So in alchemy and other astrological symbols, the earth is represented by a cross, an equal armed cross. That's what it is, equal armed cross inside of a circle, and that's one of the symbols for earth, or the planet Earth. The new pattern constellating, the old order being questioned. So, like consciousness, like new ideas, new thoughts, new air, a breath of fresh air, as we like to say, emerging from old things, old stagnant patterns and whatnot. In magic, the cross represents the four directions, the four main moon phases: new, waxing, gibbous, full moon, and waning. No, not gibbous. Sorry, half moons. First quarter. There we go. So, waxing or new moon, first quarter, full moon, second quarter. So the new moon, the first half moon, the full moon, the second half moon, and then back to new moon. So the four main moon phases. Also, of course, again, represents the earth. The crossroads. So crossroads in magic are a very powerful symbol, especially in hoodoo magic and a few other types. It's like you go bury stuff at the crossroads, you go make deals with deals with the devil at the crossroads. Hecate, the goddess of witches, is associated with the crossroads. Well, specifically the three-road crossroads. Hecate is more associated with the three-road crossroads, like a Y shape. Devil's associated with the four crossroads. So there's that. The other thing with that is, the thing that brought up for me while I was writing this up is, in Lenormand there is a card called the Cross, and that has to do with stuff crossing you, obstacles in your way, things to overcome, difficulties. So the cross is kind of both difficulties and a place of magic and new direction, and earth, and the sword, again, consciousness emerging. So from all these obstacles in the earth and the cross, well, to get through it, we're going to need new consciousness, a new form of air, breaking free, using the sword to cut through our obstacles type deal. And of course, in the celestial, the Ace of Swords is associated with Venus in the first degree of Libra, and the first decan of Libra. So degrees 0 through 9 in Libra. So Venus in Libra, which is already ruled by Venus, it's Venus and Venus, double Venus. So a lot of air, a lot of feminine, a lot of beauty archetypes, a lot of I think Queen of Swords type deal. A lot of very femme yet sharp. Now, going through all that, going through a lot. So then we're going to go to the traditional astrology now. So in traditional astrology, again, this Ace of Swords is associated specifically with the power of air. It's not the personification of air, that's a page, it's the power of air. It's more the element. It's more closer to the element of air. It's not specifically the element because the entire suit is the element, but the ace is the power of that element. So the power of air, that invisible force that keeps our spirits bound to our bodies, as some might say. The carrier, air and the wind are the carrier, well, air specifically because it's the gas that reverberates, is our carrier of sounds, of our thoughts and ideas, our voices, which is why air is often associated with intelligence, because that's how we talk, is to vibrate air in our throats to send out sounds. That's how we hear. These sound waves hit our eardrums, so it's the movement of air allows us to speak and hear each other. Traditionally. I mean, we've definitely come a long way in the communication area. We've now got sign language and writing, which, again, but it still falls under that communication. So even sign language, lip reading, writing, reading, hell, even visual media still falls under air communication. So it's symbolic. So again, it's symbolically an intellectual concept. The power of air is mental, light. It's elusive. It's uncontainable and uncontrollable. It can be both conversational and social. I love how I get ahead of myself and then I go back to read my keywords and it's like, I kind of already went over this. Oops. Or it falls out of order. So when I say elusive and uncontainable, it's because we can't really contain air in a thing. We can with like small stuff, and I'm sure people have managed to. We can contain air. Yes, we can have like vacuum sealed rooms and all that, but we literally have to block air out of a small section to contain more air. But because it is so difficult, it is extremely difficult, and symbolically we're thinking about ideas and thoughts. It's like thoughts can the only way to contain thoughts and ideas is to keep them in our heads. And even that may not work because multiple people can have the same type of ideas and thoughts, and it's very elusive. You can't just grab onto a bunch of air and say you will stay here and you will never change and never move, and it's already gone. So anyway, the card I have for this, the Power of Air, is from my Black Cat Tarot, and we have here a cat standing on a cliffside top, with a thorn forest behind them and open air in front of them. It's kind of reminiscent of the Fool. And they're standing there with their white cloak billowing behind them, holding onto their sword attached to their hip, and they're blowing in an air horn, like a war horn. Blowing into a war horn to either... They're calling in something. They're announcing the arrival of something, or it's a signal. The horn in general is always used as a signal. Whether we could say that this cat is either calling in the day to banish the night behind him, or she's calling her troops to battle. It's like it's time to attack, the sun has risen, it's time to fight. Or maybe they're starting a ritual. They're announcing that the sun has risen, the dark is over, and it's time to celebrate. Maybe there's a multitude of possibilities here, and that's that's a word I definitely associate with this, is possibility. And this card in particular is like something brand new and fresh is coming in. You're calling in something new, whereas some of the others were a bit burdensome. Some of the previous decks, representations of the card were a bit burdensome. This one it's new possibility. I wouldn't say it's like, oh yay, joy and light. It's more like, okay, something's coming. It's a bit more grounded and settled because we've got this entire half of this card is dark and thorny, and it's like, yes, you're calling in something new, but there's still stuff. There's still stuff behind you. There's still danger behind you that you have to take care of. You might call in new power. It's calling in new power to help you defeat the darkness behind you. It's an interesting concept here. I kind of like this one. The Black Cat Tarot is always kind of a little bit more cheerful than any of my other decks. It's actually fairly cheerful. But even this card is a little bit somber. And I just realized here that the other thing that could be happening here is, you see down here in this corner, I'll get it closer, there is a decapitated dragon's head. So this is most likely a knight also announcing their victory over this terrible this terrible beast that was causing harm to probably their people and kingdom. It's like they're announcing their victory. They've defeated the night and the dark, and now they're bringing in the day. So there's a lot of that, but even that is, death had to happen for that. So there's still that somberness is, in order to bring in the light, we had to kill something. So there's still that grief of death having happened. So that power of air, a lot. Alright, next up, we're moving into the Kabbalah. Alright, so aces, of course, are all associated with Keter, or crown, the very first Sephiroth at the very top of the tree. It's a place where divinity first becomes manifest, as I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the number one. It's the energy of absolute unity. So if you think... So again, the thing I like about the Kabbalah and numerology is if you can... think of one, apply it to the other. Keywords for one kind of always apply to the other. Kabbalah is slightly more specific than numerology because it does come from Judaic mysticism, but it's fairly close, and that's my best. That's how I best understand it. Energy of the absolute unity. It's also Keter's the place of pure existence and perfection. It's singular, absolute, beautiful. It's before the divine starts looking at itself. It's before it starts knowing it starts looking at itself and understanding the difference between it and its reflection. One is where we're singular, where we don't recognize that baby in the mirror is us. That's someone else, because us is all right here. Nothing else can be us, not even our reflection. It's astrologically or astronomically, it's represented it's representative of the entire cosmos. It's associated again with crown chakra, of course, our highest chakra on our head, or in our body anyway, because there's higher chakras technically. But that gets a little bit, depends on who you ask. Same with the ones underneath our feet. Depends on who you ask. Alright, it's, Keter represents the gift of clarity. Wait. Oh. Okay, so, from the book I used for this, Kabbalah and Tarot and Kabbalah. I forget the title right now, but I know the author is Isabel Radau Kleigman. You can go back to some of my earlier videos. I know I've shown her book on here before. So she uses the RWS tarot, the Rider-Waite-Smith, and in that, the Ace of Swords is depicted as a sword being handed by the hand of God or the hand of divinity. So the gift of the sword, the gift of clarity and mental acuity, has a crown over it, or more aptly, the sword is piercing the crown. So it's using realism, using that sharp double-edged sword of intellect and knowledge to pierce that ego and go like, here's the real truth. So it's this. So basically, the crown's sitting there like, oh, I know, I can tell these people to do what, and they'll just like, oh, yes, sir, yes, of course, and things will blow up eventually because you didn't listen. So it's like this egomaniac type deal, and then comes along the gift of the divine. It's like, here's the sword of realism, and it just pierces that ego and blows it up. It's like, so that actually didn't work because... And if you'd had that sword previously, because this can be either aftermath or before, like, okay, somebody coming along going, that might not work, is actually going to help, like, I mean, it's going to destroy the ego a bit, but it might keep things from blowing up as badly. So using realism to pierce egotistical delusion is how she puts it. So the card I have for that is from my La Favol deck, which is the Ace of Masks, because I associate the masks with the swords in this deck, because there's not a clear correlation. You have to make up your own type deal. And I could have used crosses, but that more correlates to water for me, so. Also, I mostly went off the borders. So, anyway. So, the Ace of Masks. So, the reason I associate masks with swords is because masks, first off, they go on our face. They kind of go, especially these masks, so it's connected to the head for me, so therefore the intellect. Also, when we speak and say things, we can create a mask in how we act. We don't have to. It's been said before, and I don't know anybody who's ever tried to do it, but kudos if you can, because I'm too damn real. But you could literally change your entire persona and personality going somewhere new. If nobody knows you somewhere, you can pretend to be someone vastly different. You can become someone vastly different from who you were before. And that's part of the mask. And all that has to do, and it's in your head. It's how you think, how you act, how you speak, what ideas you put out there. It has to do with the head. So it's like, and we create these personas, and they are kind of our masks, and those masks can either be something we take off, or they can be part of us. It all differentiates and depends, but I associate them swords because, again, they're with the head, the air, the intellect. So it's when divinity becomes manifest, that's when it first takes a form, and that form may be a mask. Because if you ask 50 people of differing beliefs what divinity or their cosmology of divine is, you will get 53 different answers. Minimum. And yes, I said 50 people, 53 answers. Oh, yeah. I really gotta get video editing software, I swear. This is spendy. And that's because belief systems have very close similarities, but also many differences, because anything prior to manifestation is unknowable, because we are manifest. So it's it's mostly unknowable to us. We can't really know the unknowable, the ineffable, if you will. But coming into manifestation, it creates a mask, it creates a persona. So we have a bunch of different possible beliefs, which, as far as anyone can tell, are all true to some degree or another. And that's the different masks. So divinity becoming manifest means it puts on a mask of its manifestation. Alright, so moving right along, because this is going longer than I wanted to, but oh well. The Kabbalistic angel is Angel 61, Umabel, or Wamave. Because, in the book, I don't know if this is a frickin' mistake or not, but, oh, I don't have it on me. Yeah, I do. There it is. I'm not 100% sure on how to pronounce this angel's name, because it's spelled Umabel, but, in the book, he says its pronunciation is Mehiel. Umabel, Mehiel. Which is, so vastly different that I went looking it up online, and most I could find commonly was Umabel. So I'm going to go with Umabel, or Uamave is the actual Hebrew letters and their pronunciations, so I'm just going to go with Umabel. So Umabel is an archangel, so one of the chief angels, second to last hierarchy. So the chief angels, so one step above the regular earth angels that go and do many different things. The archangels are they all have their own little pod of people. They're like managers that manage their little group of employees and then report to higher and higher beings. And they report to higher ups, to 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 report. Yeah, you get the idea. So archangels are the second to lowest angels. Umabel is okay. So their psalm real fast is 113:2. And Umabel means God above all names elevated. So above all names elevated. So the elevation. Umabel can obtain anyone's friendship and rules over astronomy and physics. And so it says its affinity and friendship obtain the friendship of anyone. So basically, Umabel is someone to call on if you wish to gain friendship, which is interesting and somewhat fitting for an Ace of Swords, because if we're talking obtaining friendship is, heart is involved, but it's often a lot of, first you have to connect intellectually. So swords, intellect, you see the progression here, or the correlation. And apparently they rule over astronomy and physics, but there's a lot of differing opinions on which angel rules what, apparently, but go figure. Those born under Umabel love travel and honest pleasures and have a sensitive heart, and love will cause them grief. Ouch. So basically they wear their heart on their sleeves, but but any sort of love always causes them. It's a double-edged sword for them, basically. So, haha. See what I did there? All right. So Umabel is the soul guardian for those born from 8 to 8:20 p.m., the physical guardian of those born January 14th to 18th, and the moral guardian for those born March 3rd, May 19th, July 30th, October 10th, and December 21st. Alright, so that's Umabel. And then second to last, the being associated with the Ace of Swords from the fantasy world, aka Spirit of Halloween Tarot, is Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. So Quetzalcoatl, feathered snake, it comes, there's a long line of etymology, I think so, yeah, maybe. But basically it breaks down to, Quetzalcoatl means feathered snake, or snake with feathers, I think it was, in Nahuatl. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I apologize if I destroyed it. It is a feathered serpent deity. It's got a lot of names in a lot of Mesoamerican areas, but they all basically mean feathered serpent, or feathered snake, or snake with feathers, or something along those lines, basically. This is one of the chief deities for about 2,000 years in Mesoamerica. Is serpent deity and a hero. Quetzalcoatl, you know what, I think I gotta break out Wikipedia for this because I was running out of room to write. Okay, so among the Aztecs, whose beliefs are the best documented in the historical sources, Quetzalcoatl was related to the gods of the wind, of the planet Venus, of the dawn, of merchants, and of arts, crafts, and knowledge. He was also the patron god of the Aztec priesthood, of learning and knowledge. So you see the association with Ace of Swords here. Quetzalcoatl was one of several important gods in the Aztec pantheon. Two other gods represented by the planet Venus are Quetzalcoatl's ally Tlaloc, the god of rain, and Quetzalcoatl's twin and psychopomp Xolotl. Quetzalcoatl. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that. The dog-headed soul guide for the dead. Huh. Similar to Anubis. What is the dogs and dead people? Alright, so Quetzalcoatl, the Aztec god of the sun, wind, and air and learning, wears around his neck the wind breastplate, which is not in this picture. The spirally voluted wind jewel made of a conch shell. Talisman is a conch shell cut at the cross section and was likely worn as a necklace by religious rulers, as such objects have been discovered in burial archaeological Burials in archaeological sites throughout Mesoamerica potentially symbolized patterns witnessed in hurricanes, dust devils, seashells, and whirlpools, which were elemental forces that had significance in Aztec mythology. Okay. Quetzalcoatl. Animals thought to represent Quetzalcoatl include resplendent quetzals, rattlesnakes, Coatl meaning serpent in Nahuatl, crows and macaws. In his form as Ehetl, he is the wind and is represented by spider monkeys, ducks, and the wind itself. That's quite the range. In his form as the morning star of Venus, he is also depicted as a harpy eagle. In Mazatec legends, the astrologer deity, I am not even going to try to pronounce that, who is also represented by Venus, bears a close relationship with Quetzalcoatl. So some of his history: the earliest known documentation of the worship of the feathered serpent occurs in Teotihuacan in the 1st century BCE or 1st century CE. That period lies in the late pre-classic to early classic period of Mesoamerican chronology. Post-classic period 900 to 1519 CE. The worship of the feathered serpent deity centered in the primary Mexican religious center of Cholula. In this period, the deity is known to have been named Quetzalcoatl by his Nahua followers. In the Maya era, he was approximately equivalent to Cuculan and Gucumat's, names that also roughly translate as feathered serpent in different Mayan languages. In the era following the 16th century Spanish conquest of the Aztec Empire, a number of records conflated Quetzalcoatl with Cactal Toplitzin. Toplitzin. Sorry. I'm kind of starting to fuck this up on purpose. A ruler of the mythico-historic city of Toulon. So historians debate to what degree or whether all these narratives about this legendary Toltec ruler describe historical events. Okay, so there was a thing about him possibly being the having been cast down from heaven. I've read a myth on it. He was the divine ruler of the Toltecs of Toulon, and then he was cast down and expelled. Expelled. Anyway, after his expulsion, he traveled and set up cities, and so many Mesoamericans claim descent from Quetzalcoatl. So, attributes. So, Quetzalcoatl, again, is... That's a lot of myths. Alright, so Quetzalcoatl is often considered the god of the morning star, and his twin brother Azolotl was the evening star, Venus. As the morning star, he was known by the title meaning Lord of the Star of the Dawn. He was known as the inventor of books and the calendar, the giver of maize, or corn, as we call it here in the U.S., because, of course, we have to give multiple names to the same thing, of different things. The giver of maize to mankind, and sometimes a symbol of death and resurrection. Also the patron of priests and the title of the twin Aztec high priests. Some legends describe him as opposed to human sacrifice, while others describe him as practicing it. So basically he's got a lot of attributes, but sun, morning star, knowledge and learning apparently, which fits perfectly with the Ace of Swords. So a bright light, a feathered serpent, so both air, a beneficent giver of knowledge, but also he's a venomous snake, and knowledge can be dangerous, so kind of a perfect representation. If I have this card up in a reading, I'd probably say, you're going to learn something which you're going to you're going to both be glad and absolutely heartbroken that you learned it, type deal. Or maybe something like that. Alright, if it was reversed, I'd probably say it'd be heartbreaking. not seeing something, knowledge being kept from you, heartbroken about learning something like that. Alright, final bit of this before I fall asleep, which I better not fall asleep. The traditional meanings / keywords for the Ace of Swords. So we have my Terror of the Old Path here, which is our traditional sword, piercing a crown. However, this sword is not being handed by anyone, it's just sitting there, and it's got a double moon on it, and the crown also has a crescent moon on it. We've got leaves floating about across, it's up in the sky, because, wind, air, all that. So, the sword again is piercing the crown, so like we said back in the Kabbalah, sword using realism to pierce egotistical delusion. So, and it's interesting because most depictions of the sword is upright, so like knowledge winning, but as we saw in the celestial deck, the sword is facing downwards, and there's some people, I forget what the difference is for some people. I know there's, like, if the sword's facing down, it means one thing, and if it's facing up, it means the other. I've never really been an ascribant to that. I'm like, a sword's a sword. Whether if it's put facing downwards, maybe it's being subdued a bit. Maybe you're being a bit more subdued about it. You're just kind of like, okay, I'm bringing this out quietly. But if it's upright, you're maybe like, ha, hear this, hear ye now, type deal. All right. But anyway, upright. It's the essence of the swords. So air or fire, if that's your gig. But anyway, the essence of the swords, the whole suit. It's quick, ingenious, a bolt of inspiration, the gift of clarity and truth. So it's a lot of clarity, bolt of lightning, like sudden understanding and an epiphany type deal. In reverse or inverse or upside down, if you like, or in its shadow side, it's a close miss. It's like something just almost hit you, but you missed it. You almost had that light bulb on, but it shattered and blew as you were clicking it on, type deal. The heartscape of holy shit, something just bad just almost happened. It's often, sometimes it speaks of accidents or missed opportunities or verbal or written mistakes. It's like, and that close miss is a knife just got thrown at you and skimmed past your ear, and you went, sorry, what now? And so in reverse, it's kind of almost had it, just missed it, didn't quite get that, didn't quite make the cut, type deal. All right, I gotta move around, I swear. All right. So, that is the Ace of Swords for this lovely Sunday in October. It's kind of a perfect for this month because we've just recently started Libra season, so the season of air, the second half of the zodiacal wheel where we move from the self to others. Multitude of such things. Alright. So that is that for now. My wrist really fucking hurts. Ow. I don't know what the hell I did. I have ideas, but I don't know for sure. Anyway, so Ace of Swords, October. Yeah. Wow, I am not very clear and clarified right now. Anyway, so that's that for this week. Yeah, look down below, like, comment, subscribe. Look down below for links for my Facebook, Gmail, if you feel like it, Patreon, if you feel like throwing $1 at me or something, or, well, it won't let me do $1. It's like minimum is $3. It's bullshit, but especially since I really don't put much up besides early access to the videos, so. But, whatever. Alright, so that's it for me. Have a great rest of you, whatever it is that you're finishing off. And I will see you next week when we start talking about the moon. The planetary body, not the card. The card will be later. Alright, bye.